The dust on Catherine Olsen's hands had turned to mud from her tears by the time she finally understood why Preston Parker had never written back. She stood in the parlor of his ranch house outside San Diego, California, holding a wooden box filled with nearly 4 years of her own letters, each one yellowed with age and still sealed in their original envelopes. And beside them sat leather journals covered in his handwriting, page after page addressed to her but never sent. It was May of 1878, and Catherine had traveled 300 miles from her family's farm in Fresno with nothing but a carpet bag and the last shred of hope she could gather. She had written to Preston every month since he left in the summer of 1874, pouring her heart onto paper, telling him about the harvest, about her younger siblings growing up, about how she waited for him. She had been 17 when he left, promising to return once he had established himself. He had been 21, full of dreams about raising horses in the Southern California territory where the weather stayed mild and the land stretched wide and golden. Now she was 21 herself, and the man she had loved since she was 15 lay buried in the small cemetery a mile from this very house. Catherine's hands trembled as she opened the first journal, dated August 1874, just weeks after he had left Fresno. His handwriting was strong and confident, the way she remembered everything about him. "My dearest Catherine," it began, "I have arrived safely in San Diego, and I have never seen country so beautiful, but it is nothing compared to the memory of your face when I told you goodbye. I should have kissed you properly then, instead of just holding your hand like a fool. I think about that every day. I am working day and night to build something worthy of you, something I can be proud of when I come back to ask your father for your hand properly. I know I promised to write, and I am, even though these words may never reach you the way they should." Catherine's breath caught. She flipped through more pages, finding entry after entry, all addressed to her. She opened another journal, this one from 1875. "Catherine, I received your 10th letter today. I have them all in the drawer beside my bed, and I read them until the pages are soft. You ask why I do not write back, and God, it tears me apart. There is something I must tell you, something that happened before I left Fresno that I was too ashamed to admit." Her fingers fumbled to turn the pages, desperate to understand. "Your father called me to his study 3 days before I left. He told me that you were too young, too innocent for a man like me, a man with no prospects and no family name worth mentioning. He said that if I truly cared for you, I would let you grow up without being tied to promises made in childhood. He asked me not to write to you, to let you forget me and find someone worthy of you. I refused, Catherine. I told him I loved you and nothing would stop me from coming back. That is when he told me that if I contacted you in any way, he would make sure I could never set foot in Fresno County again, and that he would tell you terrible lies about me to poison your heart against me. He showed me a letter he had already written, claiming I had been caught stealing, that I was a cheat and a liar. He said he would send it to you at the first word from me." Catherine's knees buckled, and she sank onto the settee, the journal clutched against her chest. Her father. Her own father had done this. "So I have written to you here in these pages every thought and feeling I cannot send. I tell myself that one day, when I have built something real, when I am successful enough that even your father cannot deny my worth, I will come back with these journals, and you will see that I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." She went through journal after journal, reading 4 years of love letters that were never sent. He wrote about buying his first 3 horses, about the way the ocean looked from the cliffs at sunset, about the ranch he was building piece by piece. He wrote about his dreams of bringing her there, of showing her the wild mustangs that ran through the canyons, of building her a house with windows facing east so she could watch the sunrise like she always loved to do. He wrote about the accident in his final entries, dated just 2 months ago in March. He had been breaking a young stallion, a beautiful paint horse he had planned to give her as a wedding present. The horse had thrown him badly, and he knew his injuries were serious. The last entry was barely legible, his handwriting shaky and weak. "Catherine, my love, I think this is the end. The doctor says the bleeding inside will not stop. I made him promise to send word to you to make sure you know what happened. I have left instructions with my lawyer, Samuel Webb, that all my letters from you and these journals should be given to you so you will finally understand. Please forgive me for my silence. Please know that my last thought is of your smile." Catherine pressed her face into her hands and wept. All these years, she had thought he had forgotten her, that he had moved on and found someone else. She had nearly accepted a proposal from Thomas Miller last winter, a kind but unexciting farmer who wanted a practical wife. She had almost given up. But then the telegram had arrived from a lawyer in San Diego, informing her of Preston's death and requesting her presence regarding his estate. She had not understood why, had not known if she even had the right to go, but something had pulled her south. The door to the house opened, and Catherine quickly wiped her face, trying to compose herself. A tall man stepped inside, removing his hat. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of sage. He wore dusty riding clothes and moved with the easy confidence of someone who spent his life on horseback. "Miss Olsen," he asked, his voice deep and gentle. "I am Parker Stone. I worked for Preston, helped him run the ranch. I was the one who found him after the accident." Catherine stood up, still clutching one of the journals. "You knew him." "He was my closest friend," Parker said, and she could see genuine grief in his eyes. "I helped him build this place from nothing. He talked about you every single day. Catherine this, Catherine that. Half the time I felt like I knew you myself." "Why did no one write to me sooner?" Catherine's voice broke. "Why did I have to learn of his death from a lawyer's telegram?" Parker's jaw tightened. "Preston made me promise not to contact you until after. He was afraid your father would intercept any letter and keep you from knowing the truth. He wanted to make sure you got here safely, that you saw everything before anyone could stop you. The lawyer was instructed to wait until after the burial to send word, to make sure there was no interference." "My father," Catherine said bitterly. "Preston wrote about what he did, how he threatened him." "Your father is a bastard," Parker said bluntly, then immediately looked apologetic. "Pardon my language, Miss Olsen, but it is the truth. Preston was one of the best men I ever knew, and he spent 4 years in agony because of that man's pride." Catherine sank back down onto the settee. "I don't know what to do now. I came here hoping for answers, and now I have them, but it doesn't change anything. He's still gone." Parker sat down carefully in the chair across from her, his hat balanced on his knee. "There's more you should know. Preston left everything to you. The ranch, the house, the horses, all of it. He had his will drawn up 2 years ago, naming you as his sole heir. He always believed he would bring you here as his wife, but he wanted to make sure you were taken care of no matter what happened." Catherine looked up sharply. "He left me his ranch, but I do not know anything about running a horse ranch. I have only ever worked on a farm growing wheat and vegetables." "The ranch runs well enough," Parker said. "I have been managing it for the past 2 months since the accident, and I can continue to do so if you want. Preston had 10 horses when I came to work for him 3 years ago. Now we have 47, and every single one is valuable. He had an eye for horseflesh like nobody I ever saw. We sell to the army, to wealthy ranchers, to anyone who wants quality animals. The business is solid. Catherine shook her head, overwhelmed. This is too much. I came here for closure, not to inherit a life I was never meant to have. Maybe you were always meant to have it, Parker said quietly. Just not the way Preston planned. She looked at him more carefully then, really seeing him for the first time. He had kind eyes despite the sadness in them. There was a strength to him, a steadiness that reminded her a little of Preston, though Parker was rougher around the edges, more weathered by sun and work. Tell me about him, Catherine said. Tell me about Preston's life here. The journals tell me his dreams, but I want to know the reality. Parker's expression softened. He was happy here, Miss Olsen. Truly happy except for missing you. He loved this land, loved working with the horses. He would spend hours with the difficult ones, the ones other people said were untrainable, and he would gentle them with more patience than I have ever seen. He was good to everyone who worked for him, fair and honest. He went to church every Sunday in San Diego and never touched liquor after he saw what it did to some of the ranch hands in town. He was building a good life, waiting for the day he could share it with you. Catherine felt tears sliding down her face again. I wish I had known. I wish I had just come here anyway. Father's threats be damned. Your father made it hard, Parker acknowledged. Preston was terrified of what lies the man might tell you, how he might poison your mind against him. He thought if he waited, if he proved himself successful and respectable, your father would have no grounds to keep you apart. My father never loved me the way a father should, Catherine said quietly. He loved his authority, his control. When I told him I was coming here, he forbade it. He said I was being a foolish girl, chasing after a dead man's memory. I left anyway. I took the money my grandmother left me and bought a train ticket, and I have not looked back. Good, Parker said with feeling. You deserve better than living under that man's thumb. They sat in silence for a moment, and then Catherine asked, What happens now? If I keep the ranch, will you stay on as foreman? Parker met her eyes. I will stay as long as you need me, Miss Olsen. Preston was my friend, and I owe it to his memory to make sure his legacy continues. Besides, I love this place almost as much as he did. Please call me Catherine, she said. If we are going to work together, formality seems ridiculous. A small smile touched Parker's lips. Catherine, then, and you can call me Parker, though most folks around here call me Stone. Why Stone? My father was a stonemason back in Missouri, best one in 3 counties. I was supposed to follow in his trade, but I was terrible at it. Could not cut a straight line to save my life. But I could ride anything with 4 legs, so I headed west and found my calling. Preston used to joke that I had rocks in my head instead of talent in my hands, so the name stuck. Catherine found herself almost smiling despite her grief. Preston had a sense of humor then, the best, Parker said warmly. He could make the grumpiest ranch hand laugh after a 16-hour day. He would have done anything to see you smile. The weight of loss settled over Catherine again, heavy and suffocating. I wish I could have seen him one more time. I wish I could have told him I never stopped loving him either. Parker leaned forward, his expression earnest. He knew, Catherine. He knew because he read your letters over and over. He showed me a few of them once when he was feeling particularly low. He said your words were the only thing keeping him sane, knowing that you were still thinking of him, still waiting. He knew. Catherine nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Finally, she asked, Will you show me the ranch tomorrow? I want to see everything he built. I would be honored, Parker said, rising to his feet. I will come by at first light if that suits you. I live in the bunkhouse with the other hands, so I am close by if you need anything. Thank you, Catherine said, standing as well. Thank you for being his friend and for taking care of this place. Parker put his hat back on, his eyes warm. Get some rest, Catherine. Tomorrow is a new day. After he left, Catherine spent the evening reading more of Preston's journals by lamplight. She learned about his friendship with Parker, how the younger man had shown up looking for work 3 years ago and had proven himself invaluable within a week. Preston wrote that Parker had a troubled past, something about a family falling apart and a brother who died young, but that he was loyal and hardworking and had become like a brother to him. She read about Preston's hopes and fears, his determination to be worthy of her, his constant longing to hear her voice again. By the time she finally fell asleep in the bed that should have been theirs, she felt like she had been given a precious gift, even though it came wrapped in sorrow. Parker arrived at dawn as promised, riding a handsome bay gelding and leading a gentle gray mare. "I brought Dove for you," he said when Catherine came out onto the porch. "She is the sweetest-tempered horse we have, perfect for someone who is not used to riding ranch horses." Catherine had ridden plenty growing up on the farm, but she appreciated his consideration. She took the mare's reins and let Parker help her into the saddle, his hands steady and respectful. They rode out across the property as the sun climbed higher, painting the California hills in shades of gold and amber. The ranch sprawled across 200 acres of prime grazing land, with a creek running through the southern portion and corrals built strong and true. Catherine counted over a dozen horses in various pastures, their coats gleaming with health. Preston started with land nobody else wanted, Parker explained as they rode. Too far from town, too rocky in places, but he saw the potential, saw that the grass grew thick and the water ran year-round. He bought it cheap and spent 2 years improving it, building fences and clearing brush. Now it is some of the best horse country in the county. Catherine could see the pride in Parker's posture, hear it in his voice. "You love it too." "I do," he admitted. "I have worked on a lot of ranches, from Missouri to Texas to here. This is the first place that ever felt like home." They stopped on a rise overlooking the main pasture, where a dozen young horses grazed peacefully. "That paint there, the one with the black and white patches, that is the horse Preston was breaking when he got hurt. Her name is Dancer." Catherine studied the mare, beautiful and spirited looking even from a distance. "She killed him." "It was an accident," Parker said firmly. Dancer did not mean any harm. She was scared and Preston made a mistake in his approach that day. He was distracted, thinking about something else. She spooked and bucked harder than expected and he hit the ground wrong. It could have happened with any horse on any day. "You blame her." Parker shook his head. "No, and Preston did not either. His last words to me were to make sure Dancer was treated well, that she not be punished for what happened. He said it was his own fault for not having his head in the game." "What was he distracted by?" Parker was quiet for a moment. "You. He had gotten a letter from you that morning, and you mentioned that Thomas Miller had been calling on you." Preston was beside himself, worried that he had waited too long, that you would marry someone else before he had the chance to prove himself. He was actually planning to leave for Fresno the next week, to hell with your father's threats. He could not stand the thought of losing you. Catherine's eyes burned with fresh tears. "If only I had not mentioned Thomas in that letter. If only I had just come here myself months ago." "You cannot think that way," Parker said gently. "You will drive yourself mad with the if-only game. I have been playing it myself for 2 months. If only I had insisted we break Dancer a different day. If only I had noticed Preston was distracted. If only I had been faster getting to him." "It does not change anything." Catherine wiped her eyes. "You are right. I know you are right. It is just hard." "The hardest thing in the world," Parker agreed. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Catherine found herself watching Parker as much as the scenery. He sat his horse with unconscious grace, clearly a man who spent more time in the saddle than on foot. He pointed out property markers, explained the breeding program Preston had started, talked about future plans for expanding the operation. His love for the work was evident in every word. Over the following weeks, Catherine settled into life at the ranch. She learned the names of all the horses, the quirks of each ranch hand, the rhythm of the daily work. Parker was a patient teacher, showing her the business side of the operation, the breeding records and sales ledgers, the contracts with buyers. He never made her feel foolish for her questions, never treated her like she was just a woman who could not understand such things. Catherine found herself looking forward to their daily rides, to the conversations they had while checking fence lines or watching the horses. Parker had a dry wit that surprised her, and a depth of knowledge about animals and land that impressed her. He told her stories about his travels, about growing up in Missouri with his stonemason father and schoolteacher mother, about the brother he had lost to fever when they were both still young. "Marcus was my twin," Parker said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "People say losing a twin is like losing half yourself, and I guess that is true. I felt unbalanced for years after, like I was always leaning into empty space where he should have been. Coming west helped, gave me new purpose." "I am sorry," Catherine said softly. "I cannot imagine that kind of loss." Parker looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "You lost something too, though. You lost 4 years you should have had with Preston, and then you lost him completely. That is its own kind of grief." "It is," Catherine admitted. "Sometimes I am angry at him for following my father's threats, for not just writing to me anyway. We could have had those years together. We could have built this life side by side. But then I read his journals and I understand why he did what he did. He was trying to protect me, trying to do the right thing." "Preston always tried to do the right thing," Parker said, "even when it cost him." Catherine studied Parker's profile in the fading light. Over the past month, she had come to rely on him more than she had expected. He was solid and dependable, but also surprisingly sensitive to her moods, knowing when she needed space to grieve and when she needed company. She had caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, noticing the way he gentled a nervous horse or the sound of his laugh when one of the ranch hands told a joke. It felt wrong, somehow, to be attracted to another man when she was living in the house Preston had built for her. But she could not deny that something was growing between her and Parker, something that felt natural and right despite the circumstances. "What are you thinking about?" Parker asked, catching her watching him. Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "I was thinking that I am glad you are here. I could not do this without you." "You are stronger than you think," Parker said. "You picked up the reins of this place like you were born to it. Preston would be proud of how you have taken over." "Would he?" Catherine asked quietly. "Or would he be hurt that I am moving forward, letting go?" Parker turned to face her fully. "Preston loved you more than anything in this world, Catherine. He would want you to be happy, to live fully, not to spend your whole life mourning what you lost. He wrote that in his journals, did he not? That he hoped you would find joy, even if it could not be with him." Catherine nodded. She had read that entry just the night before, one of Preston's last coherent passages. He had written that if anything happened to him, he hoped she would not let grief consume her, that she would open her heart again when the time was right. "I think I am starting to heal," Catherine said carefully. "I think I am beginning to see a future here that I did not expect." Parker's expression grew intense. "What kind of future?" Catherine's heart raced, but she forced herself to be honest. "One where I am not alone. One where someone who understands this life, who loves this land as much as Preston did, might want to build something with me." "Catherine," Parker said, his voice rough, "I need you to be clear about what you are saying because I do not want to misunderstand." "I am saying that I have feelings for you," Catherine said, her courage almost failing. I know it has only been a few months since Preston died, and I know it might seem wrong, but I cannot help what I feel. You have been kind and patient, and somewhere along the way, I started to care for you as more than just a friend or a business partner." Parker closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, there was a hunger in his gaze that made Catherine's breath catch. "I have been fighting this for weeks," he admitted. "Telling myself I was being disrespectful to Preston's memory, that you were vulnerable and I was taking advantage. But God, Catherine, I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep the same way. You are in my head every moment." "Then why did we waste time fighting it?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Parker stood up and pulled her to her feet, his hands warm on her arms. "Because I wanted to make sure you were ready. Because I wanted to give you time to grieve properly. Because I did not want you to have regrets." "I do not regret this," Catherine said firmly. "Preston wanted me to be happy. You just said so yourself. And you make me happy, Parker. You make me feel alive again." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses. "Then I am going to kiss you now, if that is all right." "It is more than all right," Catherine said, and then his lips were on hers, warm and sure and perfect. The kiss was everything she had not known she was waiting for, tender but passionate, a promise of things to come. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Parker rested his forehead against hers. "I will court you properly," he said. "I will do this right, the way you deserve. No rushing, no pressure. Just us taking our time." "I would like that," Catherine said, her heart soaring. True to his word, Parker courted her with old-fashioned care over the following months. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, took her on picnic rides to beautiful overlooks, sat with her in the evenings reading aloud from books of poetry. He was affectionate but respectful, never pushing her beyond what she was ready for. Catherine bloomed under his attention. She had thought she understood love with Preston, and perhaps she had, but this was different. This was built on shared experience and genuine partnership, on working side by side every day and choosing each other over and over. She and Parker made decisions together about the ranch, disagreed sometimes but always talked through their differences. They laughed together, mourned together, dreamed together. By the time autumn arrived, painting the California hills in shades of bronze and rust, Catherine knew she wanted to spend her life with this man. She was standing in the barn one October evening, watching Parker work with Dancer, the paint mare that had indirectly brought them together. The horse had proven to be as talented as Preston had believed, and Parker had continued her training with infinite patience. "She trusts you," Catherine said, leaning on the fence. Parker looked over with a smile that made her stomach flutter even now. "She is a good horse, just needed the right handling. Preston knew what he was doing when he chose her." "Preston knew what he was doing with a lot of things," Catherine said, "including making sure you were here to take care of his ranch and the woman he loved." Parker led Dancer to the fence and looped her lead rope over the rail. He came to stand in front of Catherine, his eyes searching hers. "Do you think he would approve of us?" "I think he would be grateful," Catherine said honestly. "His last journal entry talked about wanting me to find someone good, someone who would love me the way I deserved. That is you, Parker. You are good and kind and everything I could want." Parker pulled a small box from his pocket, and Catherine's breath caught. "I have been carrying this around for 2 weeks," he admitted, waiting for the right moment. "But I think every moment with you is the right moment." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond, beautiful in its simplicity. "Catherine Olsen, will you marry me? Will you build this life with me, raise horses and children, grow old watching sunsets from that porch? I love you more than I thought possible, and I promise to spend every day trying to make you as happy as you make me." Tears streamed down Catherine's face, but she was smiling. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. Parker slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her thoroughly, and Dancer nickered as if in approval. They were married in early December at the small church in San Diego, with the ranch hands in attendance and Parker's family traveling from Missouri for the occasion. Catherine wore a dress of ivory silk, simple but elegant, and carried wildflowers despite the winter season. Parker looked handsome and nervous in his best suit, and when he said his vows, his voice shook with emotion. "I promise to love you faithfully, to be your partner in all things, to honor the memory of the man who brought us together while building our own future," he said, and Catherine knew he meant every word. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, both of them nervous but eager. Parker was gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed that had once been meant for Preston and Catherine felt only peace, not guilt. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Parker replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for waiting for me to be ready," Catherine said. Life settled into a rhythm after that, the rhythm of a working ranch and a growing marriage. Catherine and Parker were true partners, making every decision together, supporting each other through challenges. When a bad winter storm damaged part of the barn, they rebuilt it together. When a difficult foaling nearly killed one of their best mares, they stayed up all night caring for her and the fragile colt. When buyers tried to cheat them on horse prices, Catherine proved she could negotiate as fiercely as any man. By spring, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She told Parker one morning in the barn, unable to wait for a more romantic setting. He swept her up in his arms despite her protests, spinning her around while laughing like a madman. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." Their son was born in late autumn of 1879, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. They named him Preston Parker Stone, honoring both the man who had brought them to this place and the man who was his father. "You think Preston would mind?" Parker asked, holding his tiny son with careful wonder. "That we gave the baby his name, I think he would be honored," Catherine said softly. "And I think he would want his namesake to grow up knowing he was loved before he was even born, just like Preston loved me before we could be together." Little Preston grew fast, strong and curious and fearless. By the time he was 2, he was toddling around the barn, fascinated by the horses. Parker was a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching his son about animals and land and honor. Catherine gave birth to their second child in the spring of 1882, a daughter they named Grace. She had her mother's blonde hair and her father's sage-colored eyes, and she was the darling of the entire ranch. The hands competed to make her laugh, and Dancer, the paint mare, now fully trained and one of their finest saddle horses, seemed to understand that Grace was precious, standing perfectly still whenever the little girl came near. Life was good, better than Catherine had ever imagined it could be after those dark days when she first learned of Preston's death. The ranch thrived under their joint management, gaining a reputation for quality horses and fair dealing. They bought another 100 acres of land, expanded the breeding program, hired more hands. Catherine kept Preston's journals in a special box in the bedroom, and sometimes she would read passages to Parker, sharing the dreams Preston had held. "He would be so proud of what you have built," Parker said one evening as they watched their children play in the yard. Preston, now 6, was teaching 4-year-old Grace how to skip rocks in the creek, his patience with his little sister a reflection of the values his parents had instilled. "What we have built," Catherine corrected. "You and me together. Yes, Preston gave me the foundation, but you and I built the house. Parker pulled her close, kissing her hair. I never thought I would have this, you know. A real home, a family, a purpose. I was just wandering from place to place before I met Preston, looking for something I could not name. And then he gave me a job and a friend, and you gave me a reason to stay forever. I am glad you stayed, Catherine said, resting her head on his shoulder. I am glad for all of it, even the painful parts, because they led me here. They stood there as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, their children's laughter floating on the evening breeze. Inside the house, Preston's journals sat in their box, a testament to a love that had never died but had instead transformed into something new and equally beautiful. Catherine thought about the young girl she had been at 17, writing letters to a boy who could not answer, hoping against hope that he still thought of her. She thought about the heartbroken woman who had come to San Diego expecting closure and finding instead a new beginning. She thought about Preston, whose love had been strong enough to survive years of separation, and whose final act of love had been to ensure she was cared for even after his death. And she thought about Parker, the man who had helped her heal, who had loved her patiently and completely, who had given her the family and partnership she craved. "What are you thinking about?" Parker asked, echoing the question he had asked that first evening on the porch years ago. "I am thinking about love," Catherine said. "About how it can survive death and distance, how it can change form but never truly disappear. Preston loved me enough to let me go if it meant my happiness. You loved me enough to wait until I was ready. And I love you both in different ways for different reasons." "That is not strange, is it?" Parker asked. "Loving someone who is gone while loving someone who is here." "No," Catherine said firmly. "It is human. It is real. Preston will always be part of my story, part of who I am. But you are my present and my future, Parker. You are the one I wake up beside, the one I build dreams with. That does not diminish what Preston and I had. It just means my heart is big enough for both." Parker kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss that promised forever. "I love you, Catherine Stone." "I love you too," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. Years passed in the easy rhythm of a life well lived. Catherine and Parker raised their children with love and discipline, teaching them to work hard and treat others with respect. Young Preston grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his namesake had, while Grace was wild and joyful, always climbing trees or racing across the fields. They added a third child in 1885, another son they named Marcus after Parker's twin brother, and Catherine thought her heart might burst from the fullness of it all. The ranch continued to prosper. They sold horses to the U.S. cavalry, to wealthy ranchers across California and Arizona, to anyone who wanted quality animals trained with patience and skill. Catherine proved to have a head for business that rivaled her husband's talent with horses, negotiating deals that left both parties satisfied and building relationships that lasted for years. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the ranch was peaceful, Catherine and Parker would sit on the porch as they had done so many times before, watching the stars come out over the California hills. Sometimes Catherine would tell stories about Preston, making sure his memory stayed alive for the children who bore his name. Sometimes Parker would talk about his own past, about his brother and his travels. And sometimes they would simply sit in companionable silence, hands linked, grateful for the life they had built together. When little Preston turned 10 in 1889, Catherine took him to visit Preston Parker's grave for the first time. It was a simple marker in the small cemetery, weathered but well maintained. She had brought flowers every month for years, making sure the man who had loved her first was not forgotten. "This is who you are named after," she told her son, kneeling beside him at the grave. "He was a good man who loved horses and this land, who worked hard and dreamed big. He was supposed to be part of my life, but God had other plans. Still, he gave me everything I have now in a way. He gave me this ranch, this place that became my home. And by doing that, he gave me your father and you and your brother and sister. So we honor his memory by living good lives and taking care of what he built." Young Preston traced the letters on the headstone with careful fingers. "Do you think he can see us, up in heaven?" "I think so," Catherine said. "I think he watches over all of us, glad that his dream came true even if he could not be here to see it." "I will take care of the horses when I grow up," her son said seriously, just like he would have wanted. "I know you will," Catherine said, pulling him into a hug. "You have his name and his love for horses. He would be so proud of you." They stood there for a while longer, mother and son, paying respects to a man who had changed both their lives despite dying before one of them was born. Then they walked back to where Parker was waiting with the wagon, and they rode home together as the sun set behind them, painting the world in gold. Catherine lived a long and happy life, surrounded by love and purpose. She saw her children grow and marry and have children of their own. Young Preston took over the ranch in his 20s, proving to be as talented as his namesake at training horses. Grace married a kind veterinarian and settled in San Diego proper, close enough to visit often. Marcus became a lawyer, using his sharp mind to help ranchers and farmers navigate the increasingly complicated laws of the changing West. Parker and Catherine grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, then their 30th, then their 40th. They watched the new century arrive in 1900, marveling at the changes sweeping across the country, grateful that their ranch remained a constant in an ever-shifting world. When Parker died peacefully in his sleep in 1915, at the age of 63, Catherine mourned him deeply, but not hopelessly. She had learned long ago that love did not end with death, that the bonds forged in life continued beyond it. She buried him next to Preston Parker, the two men who had shaped her life resting side by side, and she took comfort in the thought that they were both watching over her still. Catherine lived another decade, long enough to see her first great-grandchild born, long enough to know that the ranch would continue for generations. She spent her final years sitting on the porch of the house Preston had built and Parker had made a home, surrounded by family, telling stories of the old days to anyone who would listen. She told about the letters that went unanswered, about the journals full of love that nearly came too late. She told about a kind cowboy who had helped her heal, who had loved her patiently and well. She told about building a life from grief and hope, about second chances and transformed dreams. When Catherine Olsen Stone died quietly in her sleep in 1925, at the age of 68, her children buried her between the two men she had loved, finally completing a triangle of devotion that had shaped generations. The ranch continued to thrive under her grandson's care, a living testament to Preston's vision and Catherine and Parker's hard work. And in the barn, hanging in a place of honor, were two items: Preston Parker's journals, carefully preserved and occasionally read to remind the family of where they came from, and a framed photograph of Catherine and Parker on their wedding day, young and hopeful and completely in love. The horses still ran across the California hills, the grass still grew thick and green, and the sun still set in shades of gold and amber over land that held the stories of three people who had loved deeply, suffered greatly, and ultimately found peace in the building of something that outlasted them all. The paint mare dancer lived to the remarkable age of 32, and when she finally passed, young Preston buried her with ceremony on the ranch, marking her grave with a stone that read, "She brought them together," because in a way she had. Her wildness had ended one love story, but in doing so, she had begun another. The ranch stood for over 100 years, eventually becoming a historical landmark, a place where people could come to learn about the old California horse ranches and the families who ran them. Tour guides told the story of Catherine Olsen, who inherited a ranch from a man who died before she could marry him, and who found love again with the cowboy who helped her run it. They showed visitors the journals, the photographs, the beautiful land that had sustained generations. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right across the California hills, people swore they could feel the presence of those long-gone souls, still watching over the place they loved, still glad that love had found a way to triumph even in the face of loss and separation and years of silence. Because in the end, Catherine had learned the truth behind Preston's silence, had forgiven the father who tried to keep them apart, and had discovered that the human heart is capable of holding more love than we ever imagine. She had honored Preston's memory by living fully, by opening her heart to Parker, by building something beautiful from the foundation of grief. And that, perhaps, was the greatest legacy of all, greater even than the thriving ranch or the generations of children who carried on the work. It was the proof that love endures, that it transforms but never dies, that it can survive years of unanswered letters and find new expression in the calloused hands of a cowboy with sage-colored eyes and a heart big enough to honor the past while building the future. The letters Catherine had written sat in their wooden box for over a century, yellowed and fragile but still readable, still full of the hope and longing of a teenage girl who refused to stop believing. And next to them, Preston's journals remained, testament to a love that was real and deep, even if it never had the chance to fully bloom in the way he had dreamed. But from those letters and journals, from that foundation of longing and loss, had grown something even more remarkable. A partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams. A love story that played out across decades of hard work and quiet devotion. A family that understood the value of honoring the past while embracing the future. And if you listened carefully on those quiet California evenings, when the last light faded from the hills and the stars began their ancient dance overhead, you might hear the echo of laughter from a porch long since rebuilt, the sound of children playing in a yard now planted with different trees, the gentle nicker of horses whose bloodlines traced back to those first animals Preston Parker chose with such care. You might feel the presence of love that never died, only changed form, moving from passionate letters to patient journals to the steady partnership of two people building a life together. You might understand, finally, that the greatest love stories are not always the ones that go as planned, but the ones that teach us how to love again after loss, how to honor the past while creating the future, how to let our hearts be big enough for all the love they are offered. Catherine learned that lesson in the dust and grief of a California ranch in 1878, and she carried it with her through 50 years of living fully and loving deeply. She learned it from Preston, who loved her enough to let her go if it meant her happiness. She learned it from Parker, who loved her enough to wait until she was ready. And she taught it to her children and grandchildren and all who came after, a legacy more valuable than any ranch or fortune could ever be. That is the story of how Catherine Olsen discovered why her letters went unanswered, and how that discovery led her to a love she never expected but deeply deserved. It is a story of the Wild West, of horses and ranches and wide open spaces. But more than that, it is a story of the human heart and its remarkable capacity to heal and hope and love again, no matter what losses have come before.